So we work with 4 different clones from our Tuscowallame estate vineyard to make 3 different wines. The first clone that we work with is 777. We have 3 blocks of 777, and I've already been outed. My favorite is block 8. It also happens to be the birds' favorite block. It's at the bottom of the vineyard, and so it's the easiest for them to get to, so I really can't blame them. 777 is a really floral and pretty clone, and that is probably why I love that clone so much. The other clones that we work with are 667. So 667 tends to be more a fruit forward clone to me. I get a lot of cranberry characteristics from it and dark cherry. We have 2 blocks of this, and it's a little bit later ripening. We also work with 114. This is also a later ripening varietal. It tends to be more tannic, darker blue fruits. Also has kind of a ginger-like characteristic to it. Last but not least is Scott's favorite, and also another one of my favorites, the Pommard clone. We have 2 blocks of this, and as you're walking into the tasting room, if you've ever come to visit us, it's the very top block, and then just below the winery. I find both of these blocks to be very different from each other. They're block 5 and block 9. Block 9 tends to be a little bit darker, comes in a little bit later. Block 5, maybe because it's closer to the road and it gets a little bit more heat. It is one of our first blocks to actually start its cycle of life with bud break in mid-early April, depending on the year. So we make the 3 different wines. The 777 is all from 777 clone. I tend to find that block 8 always makes it into the 777 clone. We do, keep in mind, taste these all blind and come up with these blends blind, not knowing what's in it. But oftentimes also our block 3 goes into there too. There's a little bit of whole cluster in the wine each year, but ultimately we're trying not to overpower it with too much oak or too much of anything. We're just trying to make the best wine possible. For our estate wine, we are trying to find a wine that's more fruit forward, shows that Italian plum characteristic, as Scott calls it, and is overall an easy drinker, not overly tannic. So ultimately, each year this is a different blend of all of the clones from the vineyard, just as the estate whole cluster is. Again, we taste these all blind. We don't know what's going into this. And for a whole estate whole cluster, we pick barrels that have a nice spice component to them, usually spice box, cedar, cloves sometimes. These are all characteristics that we find from our whole cluster, and so that's what will be ultimately going towards that blend. The whole cluster, the way we make these wines is we actually, when the fruit is received, we will, before destemming, we will sort out a small portion of whole cluster. And as Scott likes to refer to me, I'm the exactor. I like to know exactly how much is going into the bin. So we will actually weigh the bin before and after we put whole cluster in it, so we have an idea of what percentage of that bin is whole cluster. Ultimately, you can't know if you don't know the weight, right? We will destem on top of the fruit so that it's a nice little mixture with the whole cluster on the bottom and destem on the top. We only one time so far have done 100% whole cluster, and we've actually learned a lot from that wine. What we do is when we're getting ready to press, we will free run the juice that is mixed with the skins before dumping into the press into a barrel. What we have found is there is a huge difference between the free run and the press lot. The free run will show early on more of that kind of stimmy characteristic to it, which if you give it enough time, it incorporates and becomes this really beautiful spice box note. You got to be patient. It's the hardest part with wine. We all want to drink them right away, but ultimately sometimes it's better to wait.